Hello, BookTube. Now that I have your attention with the title of this video, The Problem with Young People, I will continue with a series of videos of negativity. Uh, but not negativity, I don't think, in a bad way. It's sort of questioning things, opening, or hopefully opening up a dialogue, like I tried with the. And sometimes it's a dialogue within myself as well, that I did with the 10 detested writers. That was meant to be where this video is, where you're watching this video now, the time slot. But uh, that's a problem with an old person who, by the looks of it, didn't get the scheduling correctly. But we won't talk about that at the moment. Uh, that's a whole different kettle of fish, is the problem with old people like myself. Uh, we're talking about young people here, um, who, for booktube purposes, are, I would say, the majority of booktube. So, rightly or wrongly, that is where, if there's any criticism of booktube, that is where the problem is going to lie, for the most part, I think, because the percentages of certain aspects that people do on booktube are going to be higher in numbers, so they're going to be more visible. And I discovered booktube, I think it was in late 2018. I'd come out of the hospital. I was having hospital at home, and I was reading, but I discovered booktube and been watching ever since. So not a huge amount of time, but 4 years. I guess that's right. Yeah. Again, problem with old people. And I noticed that there were huge pronouncements that people, young people, were making based on a few years of reading, and which is fine. As the saying is, everybody has an opinion. But yes, everybody has an opinion. But if it's not backed up by, reasoning, that is another problem. There are many problems, but that is another problem. But any opinion, even that is backed up by facts or appearances of facts, is open for being rebutted. And just because you have an opinion, and that's another thing, but that's not a young. I don't know. I don't think it's a young person thing, but it seems to be this day and age, and on the internet, everybody has opinion, and if you disagree with me, you're wrong. That's wrong. That's a problem. That's another problem. To me, that is only positive that comes out of it. That you open up a dialogue on things, and that is first and foremost the best thing to do, is open up a dialogue. However, as I said, you get these polarized views of how some people view things, so it does create, or it can create problems, more problems. The word problem here is more prevalent than the young in the title of this video. And somebody made a very, very, very good comment on my video yesterday. There were some that were good. So there were some that sort of vaguely, and I got emails vaguely accusing me of being snobbish, that I didn't like these authors, by accusing me of being by being snobbish. So I always find that funny. I always find that humorous and entertaining when that happens. But the one that is pretty good, and I've heard that before, and I've even said that, Like, I don't know if it's the problem with the book or the writer, or is it within me? And most people assume it's within them, which is probably a good assumption to make. However, when somebody likes something, it then, to me, in my mind, after seeing this in the question or in the comments, made me think, well, that's a problem with them if they like it as well. That could be a problem with them, within them, because where are they coming from that it's a good book or a good author? Is it because they have critically, looked at this and in their own mind critically and picked it apart to say it's good? Or is it just an emotional reaction? Or is it that they are going by the hyperbole of the of what people have said, and they just go along with it? A lot of times I think all those things, all the above, happen. And so you right away are against, up against it when you disagree with something. And the whole point of disagreeing with something, at times, or at least with me, I try to. It's disagreeing with myself. A lot of times, I question myself, and that's where I think some people who have said I was snobbish in that in an email and so forth did not watch to the end of the video, which I think is pretty clear of what I was saying. I don't always say things, because what's the use of saying things sometimes plainly? Sometimes you need to keep a little poetic, or at least attempt to, and show but don't tell, I guess, is another way of doing it. And it gets back to, now let's go back to young people there for a second. The pronouncements. I don't mind. I don't really care anymore about people getting on the internet that's saying, making pronouncements, whether they're young, old, or whatever. I guess I have a problem with people when you look at the comments, specifically with regards to BookTube, and you clearly have somebody making a comment, and we'll use a young person as they say, that's 18, 19, 20 years old, making pronouncements of the greatest literature ever written based on a few years of reading. That's where it comes from what I said, the problem is within them, because they cannot have read a huge width and breadth of literature, fiction, whatever, because of their age. Not everybody is Steve Donahue that can read, thousands of books in a couple days. Talking about hyperbole. But people hang on their every word. That, to me, is the biggest problem. And another problem is, once you mention that to try to open up a dialogue, there are attacks, not discussion, attacks with veiled discussion in sometimes, and I've seen that in comments where the specific one I'm thinking of, because it really stood out with me. I don't know, I can't remember what booktuber it was, but she was 8. I think she was 17 or 18, and pronounced this thing. Huge booktuber at the time it was. This is several years ago, and somebody took her to task for this, and everybody was attacking that person. But he said, that, well, how can you make these pronouncements based on, clearly from your own words, you haven't read a lot of stuff. You said you haven't read this, you haven't read that. So how can you say those are the best as an absolute? As an opinion of what you've read, perfectly fine, this person was saying. But he was attacked of being ageist because she was young. And I didn't see that with the comment. I didn't see that aspect that he was. I can't remember now, that the person, let's just say the person was being ageist. They were just questioning, and it was just rightly so. Somebody who's read, like, you're 17. Let's say you started reading at 10 years old. Um, you know, Literature. The classics, as this person was talking about. That's 7 years. It's not bad if you're a heavy reader. However, does the 7 years match up to 20 years, 30 years, 50 years, 60 years, that people have read? No, it can't. It cannot. And the thing is, and we're talking about rereading as well. And because, and that comes back to my 10 detestable authors. Since I read these authors, it's been anywhere from 25 to 40 years. And I euphemistically or jokingly say, well, in that time, those writers and those books may have changed. Obviously, they haven't. I have changed. For various reasons, life changes you, but also the reading of things change. Change your perception of writing. Or can do, or should do, actually. I think it should. I think you should change. And people say evolve. It doesn't mean that you're going from a lower part to next. It can devolve, it can do everything, but it will change, or it should change. And rereading is the key here, because you can then pick up something that you didn't like before, or that you liked, and reread it and go, ooh, yeah, that's not quite what I thought of it at the time. This person just didn't quite get it, but I didn't notice it before because I had not done X, Y, and Z on all these other thousands of things in life. So anyway, so at the end here, I want to sort of say that the problem with the young was a way of getting you to watch this video, I guess. And hopefully you've watched it to the end. Because the young don't have any corner on being problematic. And I did a little search, because I've always read about that there was an inscription that was found, a Latin inscription that basically talked about despairing and decrying young people of today, of that time, and saying, they are problematic. And I was going to quote that, but I couldn't quite find it, because I think a lot of these things are apocryphal. They're not really real. But it still holds that in every generation looks back on a previous generation as problematic and not X, Y, or Z. There's truth to it, but at the same time, it's not the fault a lot of times of the generation. I think every generations do have faults that hopefully they'll get out of, but that doesn't always happen, but that's another topic. It's, again, I guess what I want to say is opening up dialogue, and that comes back to, like, about the my list, where it was opening up a dialogue more within me, because I realized that these books, I haven't read them in a long time, and that's why I used the example at the end of George Orwell, that he would have been on a detested author list, but now he's one of my favorite authors. So, and also by creating this list, I've created a list for myself of 10 authors that I don't like, or I haven't liked. That doesn't mean I won't like them a year or two now when I revisit them. My dislike might be more, and it might, my years of reading might reinforce that, but that's fine too. That's all good, I think, and all positive for me, that is. And sometimes you need to question these things. You need to question greatness, either within yourself, and don't take things fully for granted. You do need to, but do try to do it in a constructive way. And if you can't fully do it in a constructive way, do it in a humorous way. It sort of reminds me of it's constructive as well, but Blackadder, and Blackadder goes forth where Blackadder says, looking at, talking about the death toll of the war, World War One, and he says, we could have saved, probably misquoting it here, but he says something to the effect that we should have stayed at home and avoided all the problems we had and just shot 10,000 of our own men every week. And I know people have been horrified by that statement. It is a horrifying statement, but that's the purpose of it. We do need, constructively, and I use that constructively, we do need the person in the back to say, the aqueduct? And if you're a Monty Python fan, you know what I'm talking about. Thank you, BookTube, and I hope you found this interesting, my little ramble about the problem with young people.